Hello, and welcome to a short box from Warhammer 40k's Grim History from the Beyond. I'm Zeckthar, and this time we'll be discussing the time of the Twin Empires.
Now, last week I discussed the Morii Schism, which was a huge part of the Nova Terra Imperium, also known as the time of the Twin Empires. This week we'll be discussing everything else that was taking place during this time. But be warned, the Inquisition has done everything in their power to remove all information on the matter. So the history of this time is scarce. Now, what is known is during the early 35th to early 36th millennium, a rebellious Council of the world of Nova Terra dismissed the authority of the High Lords of Terra and claimed separate rule over the Imperium's worlds in the Segmentum Pacificus and the galaxy's western reaches. At the same time, the Adeptus Mechanicus was also riven by religious dissension and civil war as the Morii Schism erupted on countless Forge worlds. But we talked about that last week. There exists in what records remain from this tumultuous era scattered and veiled references to a great threat to mankind arising in the Ghoul stars, known as the Pale Wasting. Now, interestingly enough, a stela mounted within the Imperial Palace on Terra recognizes the service of the Nova Marines for their actions against the Pale Wasting that occurred in the 34th millennium. This artifact praises the chapter and credits their work for having
unmade that which cannot die.
This campaign was where the Nova Marines earned some of their earliest recorded battle honors. Much of the extant evidence related to this threat has been censored or purposely destroyed, but there are contradictory indications which describe the nature of the threat as both a star-spawn plague that swept away scores of worlds and as nightmare engines, slaughtering whole sectors. Those partial records which have been uncovered suggest that the threat was Xenos in nature, and that more than one Space Marine chapter may have been completely destroyed in the course of the conflict. The Nova Marines took part in the campaign to quell the threat of the Pale Wasting, and though this is one of the chapter's earliest recorded battle honors, the chapter's own chronicles are curiously empty of any reference to this conflict. Were it not for such prominent recognition, the incident might have been completely forgotten. Stationed beyond the frontiers of the Imperium, the Death Spectres chapter currently maintains a constant vigil to ensure that the inhabitants of the Ghoul stars never again threaten the galaxy. Now, over the next 900 years, civil war ensued, and from what little information I could gather, it seems that the Nova Marines weren't the only Space Marine chapters active in this, but one of the original foundings, the Dark Angels. It must be noted that in 257.m35, the Dark Angels, following the trail of Cypher, are led to believe that at least one member of the newly declared Council of Nova Terra is the notorious Fallen Angel. Leading a daring Ravenwing strike, they assaulted Nova Terra, but failed to apprehend any prisoners. Okay, so we have danced around the man known as Cypher since our Vox about Cadia, and I'm tired of it. Now, I can't get into all the details on this enigma wrapped in a conundrum, but I will try to give you at least a better understanding of this haunting figure. Now, Cypher is technically one of the fallen angels of the Dark Angel Space Marine chapter, and one of the members of that loyalist chapter believed to have turned chaos during the Horus Heresy in the early 31st millennium. Maybe. It's hard to explain. You see, Cypher is a being wrapped in shadow, an entity whose every move is cloaked in mystery. His motives and methods are themselves an enigma. Even the name or title by which he is known seems to conceal something, although whether it is a metaphor or yet another conundrum is unknown. To the Imperium at large, Cypher is either wholly unknown or a being of shadowy rumor that seems to be somehow connected to or sought by the Dark Angels in their successor chapters. To the Unforgiven, Cypher is a being of legend of untold speculation. Cypher is the one whom the Masters of the Dark Angels seek above all others, for he is their most hated foe. The Dark Angels have been chasing Cypher since the catastrophic fall of Caliban, and he has eluded capture for nearly 10,000 standard years. During that time, Cypher has appeared in each of the 5 segmenta, materializing as if from nowhere. Wherever he surfaces, he brings with him death and destruction, although whether he's the culprit or merely a herald of woe is unclear. Cypher seldom instigates the violent acts that invariably occur when he is present. It is rather that he seems to act as a catalyst, fanning the hatred and mistrust of those around him into a raging fire, and then he vanishes from the scene as abruptly as he arrives, leaving burning worlds in his wake. Besides havoc and ruin, there is another trail that Cypher leaves behind. Legend and rumors abound after the passage of this mysterious robed figure. The intrigue over his rapid departure is magnified by the inevitable wave of ensuing questions. Sometimes the interrogations are conducted by Inquisitors, or their agents, while at others, Chaos Space Marines seek more knowledge about the cryptic figure that weaves in and out of their strongholds. Regardless of whether other factions arrive to ask questions, the Dark Angels always follow the trail, much like they did on Nova Terra. Grim-faced and taciturn as to their own purpose, they query any who have had contact or might have spoken with Cypher. Those who have some knowledge, or are suspected of having some, are taken away by the black-armored interrogator chaplain. Few return. As to who or what Cypher truly is, none can say. Those who have witnessed him in action report that he wears simple ceremonial robes, much like those of the Dark Angels. Beneath his garment can be seen the thick plates of dark power armor. Stranger still by far, however, is that no matter where in the galaxy Cypher surfaces, it is only a matter of time before the Dark Angels, or one of their successor chapters, follow. The interrogator chaplains ask many questions, but they give no answers themselves. Despite the constant search for Cypher, none have yet been successful in capturing or destroying him, or so it would seem. The Dark Angels have believed Cypher neutralized on numerous occasions, yet he always returns. His loyalties and motivations remain impossible to guess at, for though he has fought by the side of both Imperial and Chaos forces over the millennia, he nearly always betrays his allies after a time. Some believe that Cypher follows some vast plan that no other can guess, save perhaps the Emperor himself. Others think his appearances and acts are random, the caprice of a being whose very existence should be an impossibility. Whatever the truth, none have ever captured the mysterious Space Marine for long enough to find out. But it is obvious to those few Dark Angel librarians who have studied the compiled data that Cypher's actions seem to follow some pattern or mission known only to himself. It is not even possible to deduce whether Cypher is for or against the Imperium, an ally or enemy to those who betrayed the Dark Angels. The only certainty is that disaster and strife follow in his wake. Well, I hope that answers some of your questions, but I'm guessing it probably didn't. Just left you with more. Perhaps I will do a bonus Vox on him in the future. He really is actually an interesting character. Yet I digress. Back to the Nova Terra Imperium. The Dark Angels showed up again in this civil war during the Hurakan campaign, which took place in 495.M35. The Dark Angels chapter's inner circle was on the hunt and followed many clues to track down Obadiah Hurakan, the despot ruler of an upstart planet which had been pivotal in the support of Nova Terra. In the Veiled region, the Dark Angels finally cornered Hurakan, who took refuge on a piratical port world. Seeking to ensure that none escaped, the Dark Angels blockaded the planet and unleashed an entire Death Wing. Deploying in sequential teleportations, the Terminators prosecuted an epic slaughter until only a single foe was left alive, Obadiah Hurakan, once the standard bearer for the ancient Dark Angels Legion. Refusing to give up, Obadiah was subdued after a duel with the Grand Master of the Death Wing, and was transported back to the Rock to face the tended mercies of the interrogator chaplains. His death was not an easy one. Now, due to this civil war, other rebellions began to pop up at the same time, such as the Tellarite Rebellion. Taking advantage of the chaos caused by the Imperium, Tellarite forces managed to gouge out their own pocket empire. In the ensuing battles against the Imperium, the Tellarite forces widely employed large combat vehicles known as Land Leviathans. These vehicles were later used as the basis of the Astra Militarum Praetor armored assault launcher. Now, after almost a millennium of low-grade civil war and political maneuvering, the Cataclysm of Souls took place in 975.M35. Now, ironically, this is where the Age of Apostasy finds its roots. Let me explain. You see, the ecclesiarchy at this time was trying to rebind the sundering Imperium as a theocratic state that transcends political differences. Billions died in the religious wars when the Council of Nova Terra rejected the ecclesiarchy's teachings, and the populations of the Segmentum Pacificus rose up against them. It was a civil war the likes of which the Imperium had not seen since the Horus Heresy. The ecclesiarchy ultimately proved successful, and the Council was overthrown after much bloodshed, and thus the Segmentum Pacificus was reintegrated back into the broader Imperium. The power of the Adeptus Ministorum in imperial politics reaches its zenith at this moment, and centuries afterwards ultimately unleashed the events of the Age of Apostasy in the 36th millennium. Now, I'm not saying the Age of Apostasy wouldn't have happened if it hadn't been preceded by the time of the Twin Empires. Yet it did give the ecclesiarchy the opportunity to seize power, as well as having the backing of the High Lords of Terra. Now, in the end, this little-known civil war started one of the bloodiest and self-destructive periods of the Empire of Man, and in conclusion, brought the Imperium to what it is today, a slowly rotting dinosaur that has no ability to adapt to the perils of the universe. Well, I hope you enjoyed this Vox, and if you did, feel free to like, comment, follow,
and of course, subscribe.
Now, next week I will be taking a break on short Voxes, because Yuxin will be doing a couple on the Astartes chapter known as the Carcharodons. Have a great day, and as always,
until next time, this is Zeckthar, signing off.